The sun beat down on the cracked earth of Varnis 6 like a hammer on a drum. Dry wind blew fine sand across the endless flatlands, whispering secrets to anyone willing to listen. But nobody ever listened. Especially not to the cries coming from the mud pits. It had been weeks since the intergalactic traders had dumped them their 2 Andori sisters, voices hoarse, blue skin caked in dust and desperation. To most, they were just another pair of exiled mutants, too alien to bother saving. The galaxy had grown tired of stories that didn't fit the narrative of usefulness. Darian Knox didn't care about narratives. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a bounty hunter. Hell, he wasn't even employed. But when he'd overheard a trader in the Grelman outpost laughing about leaving 2 Monas to die in the pitfields, something in him snapped. Not the kind of angry snap. The kind that told him he was already halfway out the door before he even knew what he was doing. His boots crunched against the brittle crust of the desert, heart pounding as he reached the edge of the sinkhole. 2 heads, unmistakably Andori, barely above the surface. Purple hair matted. Eyes wild with exhaustion. And yet, they stared back at him with the sharpness of someone who had not yet given up. "You're not a mirage," the older one said, her voice like gravel rolled in honey. "Nope," Darian replied, crouching at the edge and tying off the safety rope he'd borrowed from an old hoverskiff frame. "You 2 got names." The younger sister coughed, choking on her own breath. "Lyra, and she's Vila." "Well, Lyra and Vila," he said, tossing the line down. "I'm Darian. And I'm getting you out of there." The wind whipped his shirt against his ribs, and the dry heat pressed against his back as he worked. It wasn't just mud. It was semisentient quicksand, a leftover bioweapon from a war the galaxy had already forgotten. Smart enough to hold, dumb enough not to let go. Vila tried first, arms trembling as she gripped the rope. Darian braced, digging his heels into the cracked stone as she heaved upward. Inch by inch. Gritting her teeth. Muscles locked. Mud hissing like something alive. With a final, primal groan, she rolled onto solid ground, gasping like a fish freed from a plastic bag. Darian didn't wait. He turned, grabbed the rope again, and shouted, "Lyra, your turn." But Lyra wasn't moving. She was sinking. "Don't you dare!" Vila screamed, crawling toward the pit. "Lyra, hold on." Darian didn't think. He dove in waist deep, hand outstretched. The suction was brutal, like the mud wanted him to. Fingers met fingers. Slipped. Grabbed again. And then she screamed, not out of fear, but defiance. Together, they pushed. Pulled. Screamed. Until Darian collapsed backwards, Lyra gasping in his arms. He lay there, the sun a white hole in the sky, both women sprawled beside him like broken angels. Silence took them all for a beat too long. Then Vila started laughing. A deep, wild, victorious kind of laugh. "You're insane," she told him. Darian smiled. "Yeah. But I'm your kind of insane." That night, they camped under the whispering dunes. Darian shared his water. Vila shared what little Andori firefruit she'd kept hidden. Lyra, quiet still, finally spoke. "They left us because we're not weapons," she said. "Because we're empaths. We can feel pain others won't admit they're in." Darian sipped from the canteen and looked out toward the stars. Then maybe the galaxy's finally due for a little empathy. None of them noticed the tiny red drone watching from a ridge. Or the signal it sent. In the distance, the sand began to stir. Something else had listened to their cries. And it was coming. The night didn't stay quiet for long. Darian jolted awake as a strange hum vibrated through the sand beneath his bedroll. Vila sat upright, eyes glowing faintly in the starlight. Lyra was already on her feet, her gaze fixed toward the dark horizon where a faint red glimmer blinked like a dying star. "What is that?" Darian muttered, grabbing his coat and holstering the small energy pistol he barely knew how to use. "Hunter drone," Lyra whispered. "Scout class. From the Syndicate." Darian squinted. "The same syndicate that left you 2 for dead." "No," Vila said, her voice tightening. "Worse. The one that buys the ones left for dead." A chill ran through Darian's bones, and it had nothing to do with the wind. They scrambled to gather supplies, Darian tossing their sparse belongings into his pack while Vila yanked up the camo top they'd laid out. Lyra clutched her sister's arm tightly, fingers shaking. "We can't outrun a drone," she said. "We're not going to outrun it," Darian replied, strapping the top across his back. "We're going to bury it." They moved quickly. The ridge near the edge of the dry basin offered loose rock and some shallow trenches, nothing deep, but enough to set a trap. Vila guided him on placing reflective shards and heat signature bait packs she'd hidden in her uniform. Darian marveled at how prepared she seemed for someone who'd been left to die. "It's not our first trap," Vila admitted. "Just the first one we get to finish." The drone came silently, just a whisper of wind and a flicker of artificial light. It hovered, scanned, dipped closer, then locked onto the bait. Boom! The makeshift grenade Darian had rigged from a cracked fusion cell erupted with a white-hot pulse. Shrapnel laced the air. The drone spun out midair like a shot bird and smashed into the ridge, twitching. But it wasn't dead. Lyra didn't wait. She sprinted across the sand with a primal scream, slid to her knees beside the wreck, and slammed her palm against its sensor core. Her eyes rolled back. The drone stopped twitching. Darian rushed forward. "What did you do?" "Shut it down, and rewired its memory stack," Lyra said between gasps. "They'll think it lost its signal." Vila watched her sister with awe and fear. "You've never done that before." "I've never had a reason to," Lyra murmured. They didn't sleep again that night. Instead, they traveled. Darian charted a route toward the Dalgary Canyon's deep, mineral-rich lands known to scramble sensors. Along the way, Vila opened up about the Syndicate's Black Ops breeding program. Empaths were rare. Andori empaths were priceless. But when they couldn't be molded into spies or psych weapons, they were sold. "The ones who feel too much," Vila said, "are discarded. We're not useful if we won't kill." Darian clenched his jaw. Useful is overrated. In the canyons, they found temporary refuge inside an abandoned mining rig. Its walls were caked in dust, but the system still hummed faintly with backup energy. Darian rewired the comms into a low-frequency scanner. Vila set up a pulse shield with salvaged drone parts. Lyra just stared out at the stars. Until she screamed. Darian spun around. "What? What is it?" She pointed at the dark sky. "They've sent a collector." Vila paled. "They think we're property." The collector ship was a dreadnought-class cargo hauler armed, shielded, and programmed to retrieve valuable assets by force. Andori empaths weren't just experiments, they were syndicate investments. Darian ran a hand through his dust-covered hair. "We're not fighting that thing." Lyra looked at him, her voice barely a whisper. "Then we hide. But you have to promise something. Anything. If they catch us, save Vila." "Not me." He froze. "No. Not a chance." She stepped closer. "I've seen things when I connect. They'll use me to find others like us. But I've also seen you. And you're the reason someone like me finally believed in a voice that didn't hurt." Darian's chest tightened. He wanted to protest. To argue. But the look in her eyes silenced him. This wasn't surrender. It was strategy. The collector's signal was getting stronger. Time was short. That night, they built something not even the Syndicate expected, an illusion. Using Lyra's empathic resonance and the drone's signal reflector, they created a phantom of themselves moving west. Meanwhile, hidden under collapsed mining debris, they waited. Waited, as the collector landed. Waited, as metal beasts stalked through canyon fog. Waited, until the ship finally left. And then waited some more. Only when the sun rose again did Darian emerge, pulse gun shaking in his hands. But the collector was gone. They had survived. Barely. Vila collapsed into the sand. Darian knelt beside her. And Lyra looked up at the blue dawn with quiet resolve. "They'll be back," she whispered. Darian nodded. "Then we give them something worth fearing." The days that followed turned survival into a mission. Darian, Vila, and Lyra moved from hiding to hiding, threading through the canyon systems and long-forgotten tunnels etched into Varnis 6 during the old terraforming age. Each night they scanned the skies. Each day they deciphered syndicate signals, Preparing for what they all knew was coming, the syndicate wasn't giving up. "We can't keep running," Darian said one night, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. "Eventually, we're going to run out of places to hide." Lyra looked up from the transmitter she'd been rewiring. "Then we don't hide." Vila raised an eyebrow. "You mean surrender?" "No," Lyra said, her voice firm. "I mean we send a message." It was madness. Risky. Stupid, even. But it was the only path forward. Lyra, with her empathic abilities and hijacked drone core, crafted a psychic distress pulse, one not just meant to warn others, but to awaken them. Buried deep in the outpost archives was a list of other discarded empaths like her and Vila. And now, with the drone's internal beacon and a barely functional transmitter, she could reach them. "You're telling me we're building an army of empaths?" Darian asked. "Not an army," Lyra said. "A voice. One too loud to ignore." They sent the signal the next dawn. Darian watched the sky, expecting syndicate cruisers. Instead, the world stayed still. For 3 days. Then came the first response. A young empath named Koro escaped from a syndicate lab moon. Then twins from the Freya belt. Then a group from the ruins of Kelna 9. One by one, they arrived. Scarred, scared but alive. All of them answering Lyra's voice. The abandoned mining station became a sanctuary. And Darian, just a jobless drifter who'd once stopped at a trade bar for fuel, became their unexpected leader. "We're not soldiers," he told the gathered crowd one evening. "But maybe that's our strength." They expect weapons. Not healing. Not unity. Not people who refuse to give up on each other. But the syndicate wasn't deaf. Their response came in fire. A missile strike from orbit obliterated one of the outer canyon paths. Dust and screams filled the air. Darian barely pulled 3 empaths from the rubble before the second wave hit. Vila triggered the emergency barriers. Lyra dove into the old systems to try to jam the incoming pulses. "They found us faster than expected," she said, hands flying over the console. "They're triangulating from psychic feedback. Can you block them?" Darian shouted over the roaring alarms. "I can do better," she replied. Lyra initiated a feedback burst that momentarily fried the lead cruiser's psychic relay. It didn't stop the attack, but it confused it. Long enough for Darian and Vila to lead the evacuation. They fled deeper into the tunnels. Narrower. Colder. More ancient. Until they found it. A chamber of glass and stone, built before even the terraforming age. It pulsed faintly with energy. "What is this place?" Vila whispered. Lyra stepped forward, hands trembling. A cradle. 4 voices. The room was alive. Somehow. Built by a species long vanished. But it resonated with empathy, amplifying it. Lyra knelt, placing both palms on the floor. "Everyone," she said aloud. "Link with me." It wasn't an order. It was an invitation. Darian hesitated, he wasn't an empath. But he joined them, kneeling between Vila and Koro. Around them, more joined. Dozens. The frightened. The broken. The forgotten. Lyra's eyes glowed, brighter than ever. "I'm not going to block them anymore," she said. "I'm going to show them." In a wave of thought and feeling, the empathic field surged. Pain. Memories. Hopes. Desperation. Loss. It wasn't an attack. It was truth. Laid bare. On the Syndicate command cruiser orbiting Varnis 6, officers screamed and collapsed under the weight of the pulse. It wasn't violent. But it was undeniable. All at once, the targeting systems failed. The drone pilots dropped their remotes. And from across the galaxy, voices whispered in unison. "We are not your tools." Lyra collapsed. Darian caught her. The cradle room dimmed. The surge stopped. But the signal, that stayed. Amplified by the ancient tech, it echoed far beyond Varnis 6. To colonies. To prisons. To labs and hidden satellites. A new storm was rising. And for once, the ones who felt everything were at the heart of it. Not weapons. Not assets. Just people. And the galaxy would have to listen. Weeks passed. then months. And still, the signal pulsed from the cradle beneath Varnis 6, a rhythmic heartbeat of a movement that had never asked to exist, but now refused to be silenced. Darian stood outside the rebuilt sanctuary, once a derelict mining station, now a thriving hub lit with warmth and life. Tents had become structures. Fear had become purpose. And empaths from across the stars arrived every cycle. Not to hide, but to build. A new council had formed, no hierarchy, no weapons. Just shared pain, stories, ideas. And through it all, Vila and Lyra remained at the center. Lyra's powers had changed after the pulse. Stronger now, but quieter too. She couldn't always see what people were feeling anymore, but somehow, she didn't need to. "We were never meant to be weapons," she said one evening, seated beside a small flame where children now gathered to listen to the old stories. "But they turned us into tools, then tossed us away when we wouldn't sharpen." Darian added more wood to the fire. "So we built something better. A place no one gets discarded. The Syndicate. Still out there. But shaken. Their collectors grew hesitant. Raids on empathic colonies dropped. New legislation across neutral planets started calling for protections, not because the galactic leaders suddenly grew kind, but because they feared what had become undeniable. When the empaths stopped being silent, the galaxy changed. One night, a scout ship landed quietly beyond the ridge. Darian approached it alone, weapon holstered. A tall woman stepped out, Andori, like Vila and Lyra, but older. "Worn. I heard the voice," she said. "It sounded like my daughter's." Darian led her in. No questions. No fear. Inside the sanctuary, the woman wept. And Lyra did too. It was her mother. And in that embrace, something long broken began to mend, not just in them, but in everyone watching. Months turned to a year. The sanctuary expanded. Artists began to create murals on the canyon walls, images of hands reaching for one another. Of voices rising in unison. Of Darian, standing beside the two sisters who had once been left to die, now symbols of a future shaped not by power or conquest, but connection. One morning, Vila brought Darian a small device, no bigger than a stone. "It's a beacon," she said. "If we ever lose the signal again, this will restart it." He turned it in his palm, studying the way it pulsed faint blue. "What if no one hears it?" "They will," Lyra said, stepping up beside her sister. "Because now we know one thing for sure." She looked him in the eyes. "No cry is ever truly ignored. Not if even one brave soul dares to listen." Darian smiled. And for the first time in years, he felt peace, not because the danger had passed, but because the silence finally had an answer. Moral. One voice may be small, but when it listens instead of turns away, it becomes the echo that reshapes the world.